Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled People Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. Karen's server refuses to refund my tip. After that, am I the jerk for being upset that my niece requested payment when I asked her to babysit for a couple of hours? And after that, scam me on my overtime? Cue the long, extensive revenge. Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen has to refund someone's tip. Here's a tip for you, Reddit boy. Try getting some sun, you look like a ghost. So please smash that like button and subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Karen's server refuses to refund my tip. I went into a burrito bowl place to order takeout. They had this new tip option on the card reader that they've never had before. The card reader is not touchscreen, nor are there tabs on the side to select options. They're just numbers. Before I paid, the screen asked what amount I wanted to tip. 20%, 25, 30, or other. I tried to press the number 4 for other, but the button didn't work. I told the worker that number 4 did not work and asked the worker what to press for other, and she told me 3. After I selected 3, it added a 30% tip to my card. I told her I wanted to select other and not 30%. She told me she was not aware that I was not trying to tip, and she thought she remembered the order number. I asked her to refund my tip, and she said that's not possible since they can only refund actual orders if there's something wrong with the food. I told her the card reader buttons were not working properly, and it doesn't have an easy or obvious option to select no, nor did the right option work. She refused to refund me, saying, "It wasn't that much money anyway." I asked to speak to the manager, telling the manager they need a more user-friendly option to select no on the card reader, and the manager told me all the card readers are like that, which it's not. Other places have a no option and are touchscreen. She told me my tip would be really appreciated and it would help her staff since the holidays are coming up, and this could be my way to make someone's day. I told her that because they are using a system like this, they don't care about their customers, let alone their coworkers, if they need to even rely on scamming people to get tips, and I want a refund. The manager asked me why I selected a 30% option if I wanted to select other, and I told her the number for other didn't work, and when I asked her worker about it, she told me the wrong answer. She told me I was gullible and blaming her worker for my own mistake, and out of good customer service, she will refund my tip, but told me this will not happen again. You're the jerk. See, this is why I have no problem messing with customers' food. My coworkers and I have to deal with people like you every day, and I can't tell you how infuriating it is. You couldn't just spare a few dollars as a simple thank you to the people who work their butts off making your food? I hope they ban you from their restaurant and that you learn to show a little compassion. Rich boy goes to Chipotle and accidentally leaves a tip, then goes full-on Karen when they aren't able to process a refund for the $2 tip you accidentally gave them. If I worked there, so help me God, you don't even want to know what I'd do to your food. I've been tested a few times like this before, and let's just say some of the entitled customers like yourself that rubbed me the wrong way got way more than they bargained for. I do chemistry in my spare time as a hobby, and I always have a full kit with me at work for the problematic customers. Heck, I even add some of my secret ingredients to random customers' food when I just don't like the way they look. Dang. Mess around and find out. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or the employees? Please let us know. I always tip servers well and I don't plan on stopping, but I am getting tired of these machines at the gas station that tell you to leave a tip when you're checking out for the chips that you bought. Am I the jerk for being upset that my niece requested payment when I asked her to babysit for a couple of hours? My husband, who's in his 30s, male, and I, 30s, female, we have a 3-year-old son together, Max. Max is a sweet kid, but has a difficult time in unfamiliar situations, and he can get overstimulated easily. A little while ago, my husband was across the country on a work trip while I was home with Max. I got a call one morning from his manager informing me that my husband had been in a car accident and he was in the hospital. He couldn't tell me much, but said that although he was stable, it didn't look good and that I should come as soon as I can. I obviously freaked out. I booked a ticket just for myself because it would be almost impossible to travel with Max, and I could barely afford the last-minute ticket for myself. I called my mom, who lives a few hours away, and asked her to come watch Max while I'm away. At this point, I needed someone to watch Max for the time it would take for my mom to arrive so I could make the flight. Looking back, I probably could have handled the logistics better than this, but I was hysterical and was just doing things as I thought of them. I called 3 friends. 1 didn't answer and 2 were unable to help. Luckily, we live close to my brother and sister-in-law who have a daughter who's 17, Sarah. We're very close with them. Sarah answered the door and said her parents were out. I explained the situation and asked if she had watched Max for a couple of hours until my mom came. I should note that Sarah babysits for a few local families and obviously charges them for her services. We have never asked Sarah to babysit before. She showed some concern for my husband, and when I asked her again, she said something along the lines of, "Well, you'll pay me, right? I usually charge this much." I stared at her for a moment, not really expecting that response, and then my friend who didn't answer called me back and said of course she had watched Max. So I took Max and left without saying anything to my niece. I coordinated with my friend and my mom, then flew to see my husband. He ended up needing surgery, but is making a full recovery. A few days after he was able to fly home, we had dinner with my brother and sister-in-law. We were talking about the accident, and I mentioned that I had asked Sarah to watch Max. I also noted that I was a little upset that she brought up payment in that moment. My brother was surprised and said he would talk to her as that's not an appropriate reaction. My sister-in-law interjected and said she was proud of Sarah for advocating for herself. She and I argued, and she said that I was entitled for being surprised that Sarah asked for money. To be clear, if I asked Sarah to babysit under normal circumstances, I would absolutely expect to pay her. It was unsettling that Sarah would bring up payment while, for all I knew, my husband might not make it in a hospital on the other side of the country. I think it would have been more empathetic to bring up the topic of payment after I returned and confirm that my husband was okay. My sister-in-law is still being cold with me, and so is my niece. Am I the jerk for getting upset? Not the jerk. It was an emergency, a one-off thing, and the kid is family for goodness sake. Your niece is sadly lacking in empathy and decency, as is your sister-in-law. I'll bet had she agreed, you'd have done something nice for her upon your return. Glad your husband will be okay. In my opinion, you are not the jerk, because if you asked Sarah to babysit under normal circumstances, you would absolutely expect to pay her. I would normally be on her side. However, this was clearly a serious family emergency, and the right thing for her to do would be to help, or to ask you later on to compensate her in some more casual manner. Not the jerk. My aunt refused to babysit my brother and I when our dad almost didn't make it. This was 20 years ago. My mom's relationship with her never recovered. Niece needs to learn time and place to advocate for herself. Reddit likes to say we don't owe others anything, but you do. You owe them empathy if you expect to be part of a family unit. No jerks here. Sarah is a teenager, and really, all she did was ask for payment for babysitting. Socially flawless? No, but again, teenager. You were upset and worried and just didn't answer, then went about your business. It may have been awkward or something you didn't like, but in my opinion, there are no jerks here. It sounds to me that Sarah has had bad experiences with other people not paying her. I know hardworking teens who have gone unpaid because they didn't know how to negotiate or set boundaries and ended up feeling foolish afterwards, especially when it comes to helping relatives. I'm not saying that you wouldn't have paid her, but she had no way of knowing without asking you. She didn't have an empathetic response to your emergency. However, just as you expect empathy for your situation, as the adult, it would be gracious if you overlooked her mistake. What would have been a kind response is to say, of course you would pay, but to privately express to her later that in the emergency situation, you were a little hurt that she wasn't more concerned about your husband as her first reaction. By bringing it up to her parents, you are making it a more awkward situation. My kids are older teens, and they've benefited from relatives giving them the benefit of the doubt, but also pulling them aside and gently speaking to them. And I've done the same with my nieces and nephews. I try to come to them with the assumption that they have good intentions but haven't learned proper etiquette yet. As a result, we have a good relationship. I don't think anyone is the jerk here, just a lot of high emotions and assumptions in a stressful situation. No jerks here, because you were understandably distraught, but gentle reminder, it is your responsibility to find childcare for your kid, even in an emergency, and that includes paying for it when needed. Also, she does this for work, so it makes sense she didn't want to give her services away for free. I know many family members that ask people to fix computers, for instance, that look at theirs for free. Would it have been nice if she did it for free, being that it's an emergency? Sure, but she's not obligated to. You're the jerk. I'm sorry you found yourself in such a terrible and stressful bind, but considering you would have had to pay an emergency sitter if all your contacts had fallen through, I don't think this is as unreasonable an ask as you're trying to argue it is. Although, honestly, this is the part that gets to me. You think it would have been more empathetic to bring up the topic of payment after you returned? You mean after she had already rendered services and couldn't do anything about it if you continued to insist you shouldn't be charged, let alone try to argue, as most people would, she should have said something in advance if that was the expectation. Yeah, no. You didn't want to pay her rates, and fortunately you didn't have to. Move on and drop the shame campaign. I understand that you feel that your niece's reaction was insensitive to your circumstances, but it's not unreasonable to be asked to be paid for labor. Whether you're in crisis or not, you're still asking her to work. In fact, you believing that your emergency entitles you to free labor seems problematic to me. Did you expect the doctors and nurses at your husband's hospital to patch him up for free also? Did you expect the pilot flying you to your husband's side to do so for free? No, you paid them for their services. Why is your niece exempt from that? Gentle, you're the jerk. I understand why you reacted that way in the heat of the moment, but to continue to bear a grudge for a 17-year-old negotiating the terms of a labor agreement is unreasonable. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her niece? Please let us know. Don't you just love the way Reddit flip-flops their opinions? Scam me on my overtime? Cue the long, expensive revenge. This happened in the early 2000s when I joined a startup. We agreed on a salary and no paid overtime and an evaluation in 3 months, and then annually. Standard stuff mostly. It was a very mediocre salary for the work, but I really liked the work itself, which was extremely interesting and challenging. For me, even if the finances were so-so, I felt I'd learn a lot of skills which would be useful in the future. After 3 years and having 10 decent clients and a bunch of clients trialing and money rolling in, the talk turned to back pay and paid overtime, plus compensating for the past overtime. At that point, around $50,000 in overtime had been accrued, which is a lot. Legally, it couldn't be back pay, so the talk was always of a discretionary bonus. Now at this point, everyone is okay with this, myself included, and this was discussed in writing, via company emails too, so I felt secure that no bad will was in play. I felt the company should be able to afford the payment. Equally, I'd happily settle for equity at a discount, which is legally possible there, if cash flow was an issue. The discussions about back pay, possible equity, had now started to drag on, and I was getting irked by this. In the end, I was made an offer of equity, which meant the company valuation was far beyond anything reasonable, in the hundreds of millions, and I'd get a minuscule stake, less than 0.01% of a company with 9 employees and a projected annual turnover of around 2 million. It was a forget you of sorts to do me out of the money, and I didn't just want to take that lying down. To say I was furious was an understatement. Anyway, the day he made that offer, I handed in my resignation. This sent the CTO into panic mode because the CEO had refused an updated contract and I was still on a 1-month notice period. Plus, I had a lot of untaken paid leave. Basically, it meant I was walking out right then and there. So, off I went that very same day, to the shock and surprise of everyone, I guess. The next day, I sent an official, registered letter requesting my overtime and back pay and received a negative response, which I followed up with another detailed demand. This was also rejected because the bonus was discretionary and there is no overtime. However, I'd been seeking legal advice, and I understood that they don't have a leg to stand on if I'm willing to pay for an attorney. As the liability in such matters is firmly and 100% on the employer, I was willing. You need to understand that going to a lawyer was very rare in these parts back then, so companies didn't generally expect this outcome. Things have changed since then. When going through the applicable laws with the attorney, I noticed there's a limitation of 7 years. So while my attorney was laying out what to do in order to get me my money in as little as a few weeks, I just asked him, what if we wait until it's 6 years and 11 months after the transgression and then file, demanding interest? I wanted this because the law stated that back pay is due at a 9% APR above the base rate, 3.25% at that time, accrued daily for every day past the due date. We're looking at about 12 to 12.5% compound daily APR. The risk is that the company folds in that time, but I decided to take that risk. I sent one final letter stating that I expect all the owed and accrued amounts to date to be paid immediately. Of course, nothing happened. For the next few years, life rolled on. The company did grow and become a known player in the area. When the time came, I found an attorney and started the case. We had copies of all of the communications, copies of the registered letters and responses. The back pay demanded now included interest, which was $112,000. What I didn't know was that in addition to this, that there are fixed penalties for each instruction to perform uncompensated overtime. The total demand was something like $135,000. To say that the CEO, who is still CEO, lost his crap would be an understatement. I got a very nasty phone call, which I dutifully recorded as it wasn't completely unexpected and was added to the filing. The CEO fought, or tried to, but when the judge heard the phone call, he took an immediate dim view. Reading through all of the communication just put more nails in the defense's coffin. The judge just ruled and instructed the company to pay immediately and without delay, and also ordered the company to pay all of my legal costs. They also got a full audit from the Department of Labor. The company paid up 1 week later. To add insult to injury, the evening of the court's decision, the CEO apparently got very drunk and crashed his car into another vehicle while drunk. He got a DUI conviction and lost his driver's license for half a year, and his insurance refused to pay out for the damages to his vehicle, brand new Mercedes S-Class, as he was drunk. All in all, a glorious day. Am I the jerk for pointing out that my brother lives a very privileged life? I'm 45, male. My older brother, who's 51, lives with me. He's never really been good at life. He's had a few jobs here and there, but mostly stuff like Walmart, McDonald's, and he delivered pizzas for about a month. He's never held down a job for more than 60 days. He dropped out of high school and never bothered to get a GED, let alone any college or trade school. He mostly just sits in his room drinking my booze, smoking, and eating my food while he plays whatever Japanese role-playing game he's currently obsessed with. I don't mind this, I truly don't. I did well in life, and my wife invested our money very well, so we're comfortable. I have more than enough resources to support him fully for the rest of our lives, and I intend to do so. He's not taking food out of my kids' mouths. He's not cutting into their college funds. It's literally extra money that I would just be squirreling away if I didn't spend it on him. Last night at dinner, my wife told me that her brother lost his job. He worked for a company that recently had massive layoffs, so it was due to no fault of his own, and asked me if we could float him some cash for bills and stuff while he finds a new job. I told her to have him send me an estimate of how much he needs to cover 6 months, and that was that, or so I thought. My brother proceeded to head over to Facebook and post a rant about how people need to be more self-reliant and not ask for handouts they didn't earn. He didn't mention my brother-in-law by name, but it was pretty clear that was what had triggered his rant. I commented on his post, and I asked him how living off of me for the past 9 years was self-reliant. I told him that he's in an incredibly privileged position because not everyone has a millionaire brother to pay all their bills for them. I also asked how the allowance I give him every week is not a handout. Anyway, a bunch of his friends from his video games started clowning on him in the comments. Apparently, he tells people online that he's an investment banker. He deleted the post and has not come out of his room since. There is an en-suite bathroom, don't worry. My wife says that it was a messed up move for me to call him out publicly like that, and that I could have been more respectful about it. And my aunt is furious with me for airing the family laundry. So I kind of think I might be the jerk here. Not for what I said, but the fact that I had said it publicly. But at the same time, I don't feel like a jerk because his rant was public too. Not the jerk. A prime example of mess around and find out. I'd kick him out to prove a point, honestly. OP. No way I could do that over this. It'd be one thing if he was dangerous, like I'd toss him out in a heartbeat if I felt like we weren't safe with him here. But being a bit of a jerk isn't enough for me to make him go homeless, and that's what I'd essentially be condemning him to. There's nowhere else to go, and he has no skills that could make him enough money to survive. Not the jerk. He decided to do something unnecessary in public. Your aunt seems very fond of him. Will she be taking him in soon? OP. She literally can't. She's in publicly subsidized senior housing. They can't even have overnight guests, let alone move someone else in with them. They'd both end up on the street. Not the jerk, but he got what he deserved. He shouldn't run his mouth like that. The problem is that he doesn't view the wealth you've earned as yours. He views it as ours. You should sit him down and make sure he understands that you take care of him out of the goodness of your heart and that he has no say at all about how you spend your money. You sound very generous with your family, and he can sit down and shut up or make arrangements to come pick him up to go live with her. He's not privileged. He's lucky. Lucky to have your help and support that wasn't earned. Not just lucky, but spoiled. Don't get me wrong, I have to hand it to you and your partner for doing very well for yourselves that you can house him with no issue. You are both extraordinarily generous to have done this. But this dude's past 50. He's seriously got to do something. He can't rely on you forever to give him a way to live like myself, who's still working on it in my 20s. Yeah, I know, the irony. Does he need some sort of medical help? Is it the way his mind operates that's causing this non-action problem? He may need some kind of cognitive therapy or medication so he can focus on whatever he should be doing, be it schooling or working. Anyway, you're not the jerk. He lied to his friends about what he does for some reason. Then he tried to rant because someone else reminds him of himself and you called him out, which isn't a bad thing. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his brother? Please let us know.
Sounds like Uncle messed around and found out.
If you don't want me to take advantage of your grading policy, then you shouldn't have had that policy to begin with. Taking a class. The class is graded on 7 different projects of increasing difficulty, then we have a final at the end. And your projects are worth 60% of your grade and the final is worth 40. The policy is they will drop the lowest project grade to calculate your grade. If the first 6 projects I got 5 perfect scores, 100 out of 100, and my lowest grade was 85 out of 100, this was the first project I had some mistakes, which I learned from. The last project seemed particularly long and annoying, and I'm quite busy with a lot of other things. I emailed the professor to clarify his grading policy, and he tells me I still need to submit something, otherwise the policy won't apply. So I submit my project, and my project is literally just the title of the project, my name, a summary of the project, and that's it. Took me about 5 minutes, if that. I submit. He tells me it's incomplete. I tell him that's the project I'm submitting. He tells me I'm going to get a really bad grade on this project. I say that's fine. I looked at the grading rubric. I should get 5 points. We get 5 points for the name and title. He tells me I'm taking advantage of his grading policy. I tell him it's his grading policy. He tells me he's not going to drop my lowest grade, and instead of having a 97.5 project grade, I'll have an 84.2 project grade. I go to his department chair. I CC him. I highlight the part in the syllabus where it clearly states lowest project grade will be dropped. I also attach the email of him confirming this policy and clearly stating something needs to be submitted to be graded for the policy to qualify. The chair responds and says that the policy outlined in the syllabus needs to be the policy that's followed, and therefore, when it comes time to calculating my final grade, he needs to drop my lowest project grade, which in this case would be a 5% grade. Oh, I already thought about the final and how that might impact his grading of my final, but his final is going to be multiple choice and auto-graded. The malicious part is, I obviously submitted subpar work, knowing that the work would get a bad grade, but it wouldn't matter because that grade would be dropped. Professor tried to back out, but department chair told him he needs to honor his grading policy. A few reasons why I did this. Had I done the final project, I would have probably spent 8 to 10 hours working on it. My project grade would have gone from 97.5 to 100, best case, assuming I got 100 on it, and I would have had less time to prepare for my final. If those 8 hours I spent preparing for my final nets me an extra 10% on my final, that's worth more than the max benefit of 2.5% I'd have gotten from doing my final project. Also, that's assuming I'd have gotten 100%. Obviously, anything better than 85 would have improved my grade, but the scale would still be somewhere from 0 to 2.5% improvement. You should have spent 3 hours on the project and assumed that the professor assigns these projects to teach you something, especially if he cares enough to actively go after little jerks trying to misuse his generous grading policy. I assume he's young. Anyone who's been teaching for a while, like the department head, has met 100 smug kids like you. Yeah, unfortunately, this just ruins that class for the rest of them. They'll probably take out their policy, and now every project counts, just because they wouldn't put in 1 hour. Yeah, this isn't malicious compliance. This is willful misuse of a goodwill policy. Congratulations on getting away with it, I guess, but it's not in the appropriate spirit of the sub. There was no antagonist until you decided to manifest one. Congratulations, that policy was there to help out students who made a mistake to be able to recover from it. Said policy will not exist in the future, but you really showed him. I usually support the malicious compliance, but this is wrong on so many levels. You took a policy meant to help struggling students and used it to be lazy, and I'm willing to bet you've ruined it for every future student. Stay in a receptionist place? Okay. Context. I worked front desk at an optical store for 2 years. I had no experience and knew nothing about eye health when I started there. Over time, I learned to do contact lens training, how to work the machine for glaucoma testing, visual field testing, how to adjust glasses, and a little bit about sales. There was a fire and we had to relocate, which brought on a lot of stress to boss lady. We'll call her ma'am. We ended up losing our tech who did the contact lens trainings and visual fields, and our lead optician. Being the type of person who doesn't like to see others struggle, I always offered to help whenever I could, especially if the patient was nice. When we reopened, ma'am's husband came to work at the office as a manager, which at the time I thought was nice because I'm sure she needed the extra support. We'll call him Sir. He knew nothing about optical, so he was also training while managing. The problem started on opening day with Sir and I. He wanted to play meditation music and forest sounds. Everyone else wanted general pop and regular music. Since I had access to the speaker, I would adjust it for them. He loved the new space. I missed the old space, but we never spoke bad about the new one. If the office was busy and a pair of glasses needed to be adjusted, I'd offer or be asked to help, and in front of the patient, he'd yell, "Do you know what you're doing?" One time I turned to him and said, "I've been doing it longer than you." I'm sure he didn't like that. We had a meeting where he had no bad comments about my work, but told me I make him want to leave. He would report every word and minor mistake I made to ma'am, and she would send me random texts about them outside of work hours. I never got in trouble for anything, but it was so annoying. Story. On one particular day, I was doing mostly contact lenses trainings, and a patient called about a contact lens being stuck in her eye. These were considered emergencies, so I told her to come in and see the doctor, ma'am. When the patient came in, she looked really uncomfortable and asked how long until she's seen. I offered to take a look until she could see the doctor. When I took her to the back, I tried taking out the lens and couldn't find anything. I told her this, and she looked discouraged. I said to her, "I don't see or feel anything, so you'd be better off waiting for the doctor, and that ain't me." She laughed it off. I told her I'd been doing trainings all day and was hoping to help her and apologized. She said it was okay and sat in the front. Apparently, she went into the room and ma'am told her there were no contacts in her eyes. The patient said that the nurse told her that there's a lens in her eye and she wanted ma'am to double check. Ma'am was really upset about this because she has to spend extra time explaining to the patient that I was nothing more than a receptionist. When she came out, she made sure to go off on me in front of the patient and my coworkers. I just nodded and apologized. Even after work, she pulled me aside to ask what I said to the patient, and I told her every word. Still, she felt the need to tell me that I make her job harder by misinforming patients. She said I should stay at a receptionist level and not help anyone because it causes trouble. I was shocked by how she spoke down to me and still believed that I told the patient I was a nurse and she had something in her eye. All I could muster up was, "Okay, I'm really sorry about that." After that day, I no longer did contact lens trainings, so now appointments are 4 to 5 weeks out instead of 1. I no longer assisted in visual field tests. I put them all on her schedule. Now we don't have any availability for regular appointments until a month and a half later. I stopped offering to help opticians, so if one person was scheduled, all patients will have to wait for that one person for all adjustments, orders, and dispenses. That one had patients very upset with complaints. If anyone had a question about anything unrelated to front desk, I couldn't help them. Even when she would ask, I just told her I didn't feel comfortable doing anything outside of reception anymore. I eventually quit and now work somewhere with a much higher pay and benefits. They've lost a total of 5 out of 11 employees in the span of 1 year, and I heard 2 more are quitting before the end of the year. Edit. To all the people saying I shouldn't have been doing anything I wasn't certified for, you're right, but that isn't how the business was run. I think people were hired based on past experiences and aspirations, whether or not they were likely to stay long. The only licensed people in that office were the optometrists. The opticians and previous tech were not licensed or certified in any way. They still did trainings, visual fields, started dilations, etc. They cross-trained as many of us as possible to maintain productivity. Am I the jerk for not helping my sister with her wedding because I'm not in the bridal party? My sister and I aren't best friends, but we have a pretty good relationship. Good enough that when she got engaged, I assumed that I would either be maid of honor or at least a bridesmaid. She ended up not asking me despite having a bridal party of 10, but I didn't say anything even though I was a little hurt. I totally get that it's her wedding and that I'm not entitled to be in her wedding party, and eventually I got over it. A little afterwards, my best friend got engaged and asked me to be maid of honor. and I happily dived into the responsibility, and it's been a lot of fun for the both of us. I've already been able to plan and execute a lot that has both made the experience fun for my friend and also a lot less stressful. Onto the issue. My sister's maid of honor honestly dropped the ball. I know I'm going to be biased, but I've received complaints from family members and other friends. She hasn't put any effort into helping my sister with her wedding, didn't plan anything, never responds to my sister's messages, and just generally isn't interested at all. None of my sister's other bridesmaids are stepping up either. They all have a reason for why they can't spend more time on my sister's wedding. My sister recently approached me to plan everything for her: bridal shower, bachelorette, and the actual wedding. She wants me to give her the same experience I've given my friend. I was a little offended because she only asked me after she saw what a great job I did for someone else. But she's my sister, so I told her I'd be willing to help if she made me a bridesmaid. I feel like it's the least she could do, and it would make me feel less like an errand girl and really part of the wedding. She refused and said that I'd make the numbers off and that I didn't have the look she was trying to accomplish, which really offended me. Like, at this point, I'm just ticked off. So I said fine, I don't have to be part of the wedding, but then she needs to hire me as a wedding planner because I'm not doing this for free. It takes a huge time commitment to do all of this work. She went crying to my mom and dad now, and they're all calling me a jerk because I should do it as a sister. But she's basically asking me to do hours of work for free, which I feel like isn't fair. Now my family is saying that I'm ruining her special day by being selfish and making it all about me, so I'm starting to doubt myself. Not the jerk. Unrelated to whether you're a bridesmaid or not, that's too much work to expect, demand, or wheedle out of someone. Let her figure something else out and enjoy not having any responsibility as a guest. Wholly entitled princess, Batman. Your sister refused to give you a spot of honor at her wedding, insulted your look, and then cried to mommy and daddy because you're not helping her? How is she even old enough to get married? No, you are not the jerk. And honestly, at this point, I'd consider not even attending as a guest.
Support our channel by joining as a member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video.
Or come watch this video next. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.